In this video, we're going to be looking at one of the questions or requests that we get quite frequently related to grammar. We often get questions like, how do you teach grammar? Do you teach grammar? Or we'd have requests like, for example, I'd like to improve my speaking. My grammar is very good, but I can't speak. The unfortunate news for that person is when you can't speak, it means your grammar isn't good. And that often comes from a misunderstanding of what grammar is. And that also relates to a lot of the questions about, do we teach grammar? Because I think people are used to a certain way of teaching grammar without understanding what grammar actually is. So the simplest summary of what grammar is, it combines two parts, syntax and morphology. Syntax is basically the order in which the words appear to make a sentence have meaning. And obviously syntax can change. For example, I lost almost all my money, or I almost lost all my money. Just the placement of almost will change the meaning of the sentence. Morphology is how words change. Now the simplest thing to explain that is, for example, a third person S would change like to likes. Past tense would change play to played. It happens with verbs, part of morphology. But we also have things like kind or kindly, happy, unhappy, happiness, happily. All of those are morphology. Now, the morphology would change depending on where that word appears in the sentence. So the simple thing is that we learn syntax first, which is why when we teach it, we teach syntax first. So syntax gives you the opportunity to put words in a specific sentence for it to make sense. We don't worry too much about morphology in the beginning. That means I'm a lot more interested in seeing if a student can produce something like, my mother liked pizza because she loved cheese. So rather than worrying about likes and loves, we worry about, can you put those 8 words in a sentence for me to understand what you mean? And if a student cannot do that, we don't worry too much about morphology, because if you get the morphology right but your syntax is bad, you cannot speak English and you cannot write it properly. Another example of that would be something like, you will really like my country because Taiwanese people are very kindly. Now the right word should be kind. It should be an adjective, not an adverb. But again, if a student can produce that sentence, then we can start working on whether it's kind or kindly. But if they cannot produce that sentence, the morphology is completely irrelevant. Now, unfortunately, in schools, morphology is tested before syntax, except if you have like a jumbled sentence or jumbled words that you put into a sentence. And the simple reason is it's very easy for me or for a teacher to write a sentence. For example, yesterday the boy to the park to play. A went, B go, C goes, D will go or is going. And I have to choose the right answer, because if I have to mark 40 exams, I definitely want to mark it like that. It's a lot more difficult to actually assess syntax. But it is very important to keep in mind that with syntax, we're not only looking at present simple, present continuous, present perfect, past simple. It isn't just the verb tense. It also relates to, for example, the words that could make up a noun phrase. Like, for example, the big black cat rather than the black big cat. That also involves syntax. And if you think about when you speak your first language, you don't actually specifically think about the rules. It's completely intuitive. Syntax is something that you acquire intuitively. You just know how to speak English or speak Chinese or whatever language you speak because of your subconscious that has control over those syntactical rules or the rules of grammar. And the way that we do that with lower levels is that we do a lot of stories, because with stories it makes it a lot easier to follow extended language and perhaps to produce extended language where putting the word in a specific order to make it meaning driven is important. And then when we get to higher levels, we start teaching it a lot more explicitly, because we then want accuracy and we want precision and we want students to know the difference between small morphological items or small word items. For example, while it seems minimal, the difference between if you can and if you could is quite significant in terms of the likelihood of you being able to do something, for example. So a short summary, grammar is syntax and morphology. Yes, we do teach grammar, but while the majority of people are used to grammar meaning morphology, we teach syntax first, because that's what you need, initially at least, to be able to speak and write the language that you're learning.